Let's just jump right into this explainer by taking a second to acknowledge the sheer, staggering scale of the universe Frank Herbert created. I mean, we're talking about a science fiction epic that spans literally millennia. It's packed with complex politics, deep ecology, and these massive philosophical questions that have kept readers hooked for decades. It's really a multi-layered masterpiece that completely changed the sci-fi landscape.
Look, when you and I think about this franchise, we're probably picturing the exact same things, right? Giant sandworms bursting out of the harsh desert, massive intergalactic wars, and messianic figures like Paul Atreides standing triumphant. At first glance, it's a universe that seems totally dominated by emperors, dukes, and barons, all brutally battling it out for control over the most precious substance in existence, the spice melange.
But what if I told you that the true driving force, the real puppet masters pulling the strings for thousands of years, have actually been hiding in plain sight this entire time? While critics and fans almost always fixate on the male heroes and villains of the story, if we take a closer look into the source material, it reveals a completely different, way more subtle power dynamic at play.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to rewind to the foundational history of Herbert's universe, specifically the Butlerian Jihad. This was an ancient, universe-wide crusade that wiped out computers, thinking machines, and conscious robots altogether. So in a reality completely stripped of artificial intelligence, humanity was forced to rely entirely on extreme, maximized human capability just to survive.
And honestly, absolutely no one maximized that human capability quite like the Bene Gesserit. This deeply secretive all-female order basically shaped the Imperium from the shadows. We're talking about a massively powerful matriarchal network that doesn't just participate in galactic politics, they quietly, methodically engineer it over centuries.
The Gom Jabbar is a perfect example of this. It brilliantly illustrates how these women wield absolute, literal, life-or-death power to test the extreme limits of human awareness. It's a metacyanide poison needle held right to a subject's neck. The rule is simple. You either master your basic animal instincts to survive the searing pain, or you die. It's not just some physical test, it's a brutal filtration system to see who actually possesses true elevated consciousness.
And they pull this incredible discipline off through intense prana bindu training. This gives a Bene Gesserit total, conscious mastery over her nervous system and muscles, down to the very last fiber. Just imagine being able to consciously lower your heart rate, neutralize lethal poisons inside your own bloodstream, or deliver devastating martial arts strikes simply because you have perfectly mapped every inch of your own biology.
So what's their ultimate endgame? Well, for millennia, their singular goal has been producing the Kwisatz Haderach. Literally translating to the shortening of the way, this is a male figure who could bridge space and time using the massive genetic groundwork laid by the sisterhood. You see, they aren't just sitting around waiting for a savior to show up by chance. No, they are systematically breeding one across thousands of years of meticulously arranged genetic pairings.
The really crucial point here is that this rich sci-fi lore isn't just about cool space powers or feudal politics. As scholar Kara Kennedy argues, it's actually a massive, often completely overlooked commentary on female empowerment. The extraordinary women of the sisterhood present this beautifully layered, compelling narrative that goes way, way beyond your standard sci-fi tropes.
In her academic text, Women's Agency in the Dune Universe, Kennedy explores how Herbert's creation actually mirrored the second-wave feminist movement of the 1960s. Now, staying completely objective about the real-world history here, it's fascinating to note that Herbert was writing during a time when traditional roles were being heavily questioned in society, and he injected those exact same questions directly into the DNA of his universe. She introduces this really fascinating concept called embodied agency. It shows how these women turn their very biology into the ultimate instrument of political and social dominance. Remember, in a world where thinking machines are strictly banned, the human body is the supreme technology. And the Bene Gesserit, well, they've hacked it completely.
Kennedy points out that this agency isn't just one single thing. It builds across several specific domains of control. We're looking at mind-body synergy, reproduction, the voice, memory, and sexuality. These aren't just neat fantasy concepts. They are deliberate, highly effective avenues of strategic power.
Take the voice, for instance. It serves as a literal, physical manifestation of women resisting attempts to silence them. It isn't magic, even if it seems like it. It's intense, rigorous training that allows them to force total compliance through exact vocal shadings. It's honestly such a brilliant way to depict influence made physical.
And then there's other memory,
which is unlocked by surviving the highly toxic Water of Life ritual, otherwise known as the Spice Agony. Surviving this incredibly dangerous trial grants a Reverend Mother the collective, unbroken historical wisdom of all her female ancestors. I mean, imagine having the lived experiences, the winning strategies, and the deepest secrets of thousands of generations of women instantly accessible in your own mind.
And get this agency doesn't just exist as a neat trick in the first book. It evolves continuously across 5,000 years of the franchise's timeline. From the original novel all the way through to Chapter House, the Sisterhood survives galactic famines, religious jihads, and even the multi-millennial reign of an actual god emperor. They constantly adapt, and they endure.
Kennedy highlights a really striking conflict later on: the stark contrast between the Bene Gesserit's organic reproductive agency and the horrific artificial axolotl tanks used by the patriarchal Bene Tleilaxu. The Tleilaxu represent a secretive society heavily focused on technological manipulation, which clashes completely with the Sisterhood's carefully managed, human-centered breeding program.
So, impartially looking at the text, we can see how Herbert constructed a literary universe where women strategically manipulate essentialist roles, things like motherhood and reproduction, to completely outmaneuver their rivals. The very aspects of biology that might traditionally be seen as limiting are turned upside down and weaponized by the Sisterhood to secure their ultimate survival and influence.
Now, this underlying tension completely explodes in the later books with the arrival of the Honored Matres. They are a violent offshoot from the Scattering, who use advanced sexual imprinting to conquer entire planets. Unlike the calculated, subtle long game of the Bene Gesserit, the Honored Matres represent an extreme, wildly aggressive matriarchy that relies entirely on enslaving populations.
Here is a genuinely wild fact for you. The rivalry became so incredibly intense that the Tleilaxu actually went as far as genetically engineering futars. These are bizarre human-cat hybrids, created specifically to hunt down these formidable women. It just goes to show how terrifyingly powerful these matriarchal forces had become to their enemies in the later eras of the universe.
But through all of it, the Bene Gesserit weather every single storm. They ultimately absorb the Honored Matres and outlast every single male ruler. They outlast Paul Atreides, they outlast the God Emperor Leto II, and they eventually outmaneuver the Tleilaxu entirely. It proves that their structured, deeply disciplined sisterhood is, without a doubt, the ultimate survival mechanism.
So what is the big takeaway from all of this? It's that in a universe completely devoid of thinking machines, the most highly advanced technology isn't a spaceship or a weapon. It's actually the mind and body of a Bene Gesserit sister. They represent the absolute pinnacle of human capability, transforming their embodied agency into an unstoppable driving force in galactic history.
So, I want to leave you with this to ponder. The next time you think about the sweeping sands of Arrakis, ask yourself, who is really steering the fate of humanity? If the true power, the actual literal architects of history in this universe, lies within the Sisterhood, does that completely change how you view the entire franchise?